Samjen Tamje Dewa Don Devi Jodon Dambara George Dungal Don Dungal Ji Jodon Drawara George Dungal Mebe Dewa Domba Don Me Drawara George Niring Chadan Yadon Drave Donyam Jambola Neba George Samjen Tamje Dewa Don Devi Jodon Dambara George Don Dungal Ji Judan Rawara George Dungal Mebe Damba Dame Drawara George Niring Jada Nidan Drave Danyam Jambola Neba George Semjan Damje Dewa Don Deve Judan Dambara Dungal Don Dungal Ji Judan Rawara George Dungal Mebe Dewa Damba Dame Drawara George Jadan Yadan Darve Donyam Jambola Ne Joranje Dadan Semjan Tamje Lo Chuzo Dowara Jenje Lamdo Sol Chulamdo Dowara Jenje Lamdo Sol Lam Chulba Sawara Jenje Lamdo Sol Chulba Yeshe So Charwara Jenje Lamdo Sol Dada Zanjan Tamje Lo Chuzo Dowara Jenje Lamdo So Chulamdo Dowara Jenje Lamdo So Chulba Sawar Jenje Lamdo So Chulba Yeshe So Charwara Jenje Lamdo So Dada Zanjan Tamje Lo Chuzo Dowara Jenje Lamdo So Chulamdo Dowara Jenje Lamdo So Lam Chulpa Sawar Jenje Lamdo So Yeshe So Jarwa Jenje Lamdo So Lomo Jen Yu Jen Nom Jang Zan Pe Ma Ge Dong Bo La Ya Zen Jog Nga Dra Nyen Pe Ma Jung Ne She So Drang Koran Do Gan Ro Man Pe Koran Je Je So Dan Dra Je Jin Je Lam Je Re She So So Ne Jon De Jin Bo La Dron Jon Da La Bong Je Gor Ge Baran Je Zon Jon Dan Do Ma Ngo Do Zo Om Om Ben Zran Gor Be Ma Ze De Hom Om Ben Zran Gor Bem The Deng Zal Ben Zraz Da Maya Zan Zar Basidi Ahom Are Mahare Nizaran Zare Zendarim Rim Zan Zan Goro Gondru Zan Je Dan Jamam Buna La La Goye Jen Lo Nga La Sung Je Lo Ye La Tung Je Jen Je Lo Wan Je Gur War Jin Je Jun Je Dam Bar Jin Je Lo Lam Je Jom Bar Jin Je Gu Je Dam Bar Jin Je Lo Bom Wan Ben Zra Gur Iman Deva Daigen Gaya Ambe Kenza Om Waka Ambe Kenza Tsinda Ambe Kenza Om Sarva Ambe Kenza Good morning, everyone. Yesterday, we talked about the meaning and importance of lineage, Dharma lineage in general, its purpose, and how to follow or participate in a lineage through determination and aspiration and so forth. Today we're going to focus on the particular lineage that is emphasized and we could say literally enshrined here. And this is the lineage of Barway Dorje. So the lineage of Barum. Now, one of the things that we looked at yesterday was finding the balance or middle way between an open, non-sectarian attitude and a focused rather than scattered or chaotic personal path and practice. One of the things that will become obvious in probably about 30 seconds or 1 minute is that when we say one lineage, that all sounds very easy. Oh, there's going to be one deity, one Ngundro, one this, one that. It's actually more complicated than that, because each lineage within Tibetan Buddhism is fully equipped to respond to the spiritual needs of many different types of individuals. And this is equally true of the lineage of Barway Dorje. Fundamentally, or in most famously, this lineage holds two systems of instruction. And these are the teachings of the Barum Kagyü and the teachings of certain teachings of the Nyingma tradition. However, the teachings of the Barum Kagyü, as you'll see, are very intimately related with other Kagyü traditions, particularly the Sermon Nyingju, or the whispered lineage of Sermon. And therefore, by extension, with both what's called the Dokpo Nyingju, or the secret lineage of Gyamtso, and the Richung Nyingju, Richungpa's lineage. To look a little bit at the Barum Kagyü, and I'm not going to be able to offer you a detailed biography of Barway Dorje himself this morning. There are two available in English. One is called Precious Essence, and the other one is a chapter in the Garland of Ketakas, which is a history of the Barum Kagyü. And we have these books here. You can read them if you want to. But to start with the origin of the Barum Kagyü, the Kagyü lineage, as we know it, as an institution or contained by an institution, really began, we would say, with Lord Gyamtso, because he combined the Mahamudra teachings that he had received from Milarepa with the mind training and monastic traditions of the Kadampa tradition of Atisha. And it was that combination that really, one could say, gave much of the present character to all of the 12 branches of Gyamtso's lineage. As you know from chanting the lineage supplication, we talk about the 4 primary and 8 secondary divisions of Gyampopa's lineage. And the 4 primary divisions are simply the lineages that were founded by his direct disciples. And the secondary lineages are 8 lineages that emerged from one of those 4. So although it may sound as though the 4 primary traditions are going to be more extensive, have more monasteries, and be better known, that is not necessarily the case. Among the 8 secondary divisions, both the Drikung Kagyü and the Drukpa Kagyü are as widespread and well known as any of Gyampopa's traditions. Having said that, the Barum Kagyü is one of the 4 primary divisions. And we'll leave the other 3 aside for now, for sake of time. But Barum Tama Wangchuk was not only Lord Gyampopa's disciple, he was also his personal attendant. And he was reportedly, according to his biographies, a big guy, a hefty guy, and very strong, and saved Gyampopa's life on at least 3 occasions. We have to remember that if you're traveling, on narrow passes on horseback, that's not safe by our standards. So I think Lord Gyampopa was either thrown by or fell from his horse once, and Barompa literally caught him in midair. And then there were a couple of other occasions too. So he had a very, very close relationship with Gyampopa, and therefore he carried on Gyampopa's teachings, as did the other disciples, the first Karmapa, Dusum Jenpa, Lord Pomodrupa, and especially the Gyampopa's nephew, Sodrim Nyingpo. And he was he held the main seat at Dakla Gampo. Now, to understand what makes the Barum Kagyü distinct, I mean, they're all distinct. Well, maybe we'll get to that a little bit later. We can do it a little bit now. In most Vajrayana traditions, there are what are called long lineages and short lineages. And this is true even going back to the beginning. For example, when we say in the lineage supplication, Vajradhara, Telopa, Naropa, well, obviously, Telopa, who lived in the 10th century, there'd been a lot of Buddhism before then. So what about all of that? Well, Telopa received 2 types of transmission. The long oral lineages, apparently from 4 main human teachers. But he also met the Buddha in person, in, we would say, visions, in the form of Vajradhara. Now, it's important to understand that at least from the Kagyü point of view, Vajradhara is the Buddha when he teaches the Vajrayana. Trungpa Rinpoche was once teaching on this in the place where I did retreat, and he said, people complain that we don't talk about the Buddha. This is Buddhism. Where's the Buddha in all this? And he says, well, we're talking about the Buddha all the time. Vajradhara is the Buddha. It's the Buddha appearing in his Sambhogakaya, or some would say Dharmakaya form. So when we skip from Vajradhara to Telopa, what that means is that Telopa met Vajradhara, received teachings directly from Vajradhara. So that's an example of a short lineage. But in the case of the Barum Kagyü, we have an even shorter lineage, because Terchen Barway Dorje received the teachings of the Barum Kagyü which by that time also included much of the teachings of, or very closely related to, let's say, of the oral lineage of Sermon. But he received them from human beings, but then in visions, he received a short lineage from a Dakini, an enlightened female being called Akasha Yogini, or the Yogini of space. And just as Vajradhara is the wisdom body of Buddha Shakyamuni, Akasha Yogini is the wisdom body of a woman named Atroma, who was the disciple and consort of the Dharma Lord Sunam Zongpo, of whom Terchen Barway Dorje and therefore our Bardo Rinpoche are reincarnations. You could say that she returned to him the teachings that he had offered her, but it's generally faced as that he received it from her. And so that is why there is a dual lineage in the Barum Kagyü. It is not the case that the long lineage was ever extinct. Definitely not. But the short lineage, coming from Terchen Barway Dorje's visions, has become very important. So another term for these long, or set of terms for these long and short lineages is oral lineage and lineage of pure vision. In general, there are three types of succession or lineage in our form of Tibetan Buddhism. The Buddha's words, or what we sometimes say the oral lineage, or Kama. The pure vision, or Daknang, and Terma, or treasure. Now, in the case of what one class of Terma, mind Terma, it can be hard to distinguish between a pure visionary teaching and a mind Terma, or mind treasure. But nevertheless, there is a difference. And there are teachings that are both at the same time. For example, the famous sadhana of Karmapakshi, which was a Terma of the first Mingyur Rinpoche, is considered both a Daknang, or sacred vision, and a mind Terma. So the Barum Kagyü aspect, and we'll get to the practices of the Barum Kagyü a little later on this morning. The Barum Kagyü aspect is already two different streams or lineages combined into one. And then we have the Nyingma tradition. Although primarily known as a Terten, a revealer of treasure himself, Terchen Barway Dorje also received a full training in many of the most important aspects of the Nyingma tradition that existed at his time. So he was born in 1836 and he passed away in 1918. Principally, he received these from many masters. His first great master was the ninth Sutu Rinpoche, Sutu Pema Nyingma Wongpo. He also studied with the 14th Karmapa, who was the one who predicted that he would be a Terten, and most especially with the great Terten Chokgyur Lingpa. And from Chokgyur Lingpa, he received also two streams of the Nyingma tradition. One was the treasures of Chokgyur Lingpa himself, which occupy about 37 volumes. And the other was a Dzogchen tradition called the Bima Nyingtik, or the heart essence of Vimalamitra. Terchen Barway Dorje's involvement with the Bima Nyingtik is very important because it is one of the ways in which, one of the aspects of Dharma through which he achieved perfect awakening, as we believe. So we have the long lineage of the Barum Kagyü, the short lineage of the Barum Kagyü, the older termas of, if you consider the Bima Nyingtik terma, some consider it an oral tradition, it's actually both, and the terma of Chukje Lingpa. And then, obviously, the crown jewel, as we would put it, of Terchen Barway Dorje's lineage is his own terma. I think we should leave the contents of the 9 volumes, and I say 9 volumes, but it depends on how they're printed. The reprinting of the termas of Terchen Barway Dorje that Lama Trotop oversaw and proofread a couple of years ago, they've divided them, so it's around about 22, I think. The edition from which I'm mainly working in translating them combines them into 5 mega volumes. But traditionally they're thought of as 9, and I'll explain what they are and so on. So the next thing we need to look at, or could look at, is why did Terchen Barway Dorje become a treasure revealer? He was originally a tulku of Sermong Monastery. He was called Chetsang Rinpoche. Tsang means a home or nest or place, so it meant some kind of like big house or something. I don't know if he had a big house ever, but. And the renowned Trungpa Rinpoche was Chungtsang. So they were both considered the emanations of disciples of the founder of Sermong, who was the first Kawang Rinpoche, who was regarded as the primary incarnation of the Mahasiddha Tilopa. So he was a Sermong tulku, but he began to have visions, and the visions were caused by his previous lives. So we need to understand, not all of them, but we need to look at 2 of Terchen Barway Dorje's previous lives a little bit. The first of these is Nupchen Sanje Yeshe. Scholars and historians disagree about exactly when he was born and when he passed away. So I'm going to leave that out. But we do know he was alive well into the 9th century. And according to sources within this lineage, he actually is believed to have lived for hundreds of years. Regardless, Nupchen Sanje Yeshe is, I wouldn't say the only reason, but almost the only reason Tibetan Buddhism survived whatever happened at the end of the imperial period. Now, as His Holiness the Karmapa pointed out in teaching on the lamp of the path of awakening, Tibetan historical sources have been meddled with over the centuries. So we can't always, as he said, we can't always go by them. The Chinese records tend to be more precise. So there's some question about whether some of the events that we regard as having precipitated the kind of dark age or gap in between the early propagation over the early translations and the later propagation. For example, His Holiness pointed out that, there was supposed to have been a terrible persecution by the King Longdharma, who became the last king of the imperial dynasty. And he pointed out that we need to question whether that actually happened. Something happened, but we don't, it's very, very hard to know whether in fact we're not just scapegoating a king that we didn't like for other reasons. Likewise, His Holiness pointed out, and he cites one of Nupchen Sanjay Yeshe's most famous books, which is called Samtin Migren, or Light on Meditation, points out that contrary to what many historians have thought, Chinese Buddhism, Chan Buddhism, was extremely popular and fully accepted in Tibet. And that if the so-called Great Debate of Samye, at which Kamalashila is supposed to have refuted the views of a Chinese master, if it ever happened, at least according to the Chinese sources, the Chinese won the debate. That's as it may be. Well, we do need to know, to understand the approach that was characteristic of Nupchen Sanjay Yeshe's teaching, and I've read Samtin Migren. It's very hard to read because it's really very, very old. And Tibetan hasn't changed as much as English has in the last 1,000 years, but it's changed a bit. He says that Nupchen's main thesis or main point is that there are 4 types of Mahayana Buddhist practice or meditation. The gradual path of the sutras, exemplified by the 3 stages of meditation books by Kamalashila, which are still taught, which we still have. The sudden path of the sutras, which he defines as Chan Buddhism. So the Chan now in Japan, Zen, in Korea, Sun. I don't know what it's called in Vietnamese, but anyway, everybody has at least heard of this magnificent tradition. So he says that Chan is a sudden path that really does work. And then the other 2 are the gradual path of Tantra, by which he refers to the practices of Mahayoga, visualization of deities and also the completion stage, and the sudden path of Tantra, by which he means Dzogchen. So it's interesting that he presents these 4 paths as fully authentic, but not exactly the same. Not to be mixed up with one another, but all to be respected. And as His Holiness, the Karmapa, pointed out, that proves that there was no suppression of Chan in Tibet. I mention all this so that you understand that whatever happened, we know that the monastic communities in the 9th century, the monastic communities were somehow suppressed, whether it was by the King Longdharma or other things, we don't know. His Holiness pointed out, he said, it can't be a coincidence that at the same time there was a suppression of Buddhism in China. You know, that's too much of a coincidence. But I'll leave, you know. So, Nupchen led a community of, we would say, lay people, or tantrikas. It's confusing when we use the word tantrika because really that can refer to either a lay person or a monastic who practices tantra. It's not the case that if a monk practices tantra, they're not a tantrika. In the beginning, the 2 communities were called the shaven-headed ones who wear monastic robes, and then the long-haired ones who wear white. We don't seem to wear white anymore, although His Holiness is trying to, Karmapa is trying to reintroduce this. Nupchen was the main leader in the 9th century of this non-monastic community. And it's harder, if you're going to suppress a religion, and somebody suppressed Buddhism in Tibet at that point, we may have been Longdharma, may not have been. If you're going to suppress a religion, it's a lot easier to identify and suppress the people who wear funny clothes. People who don't wear funny clothes, who dress like everybody else, are harder to spot, you know. I mean, if somebody who wanted to suppress Buddhism walked into this room, they would probably suppress Colleen, David, and me first because we're wearing the suppress me clothes, you know? So, okay. That's not the only reason. There are many, many more things. Now, to make it even more complicated, because I can see that it's not complicated enough yet. To make it even more complicated, Guru Rinpoche was not Nupchen's only master. He also studied with a king of the Kathmandu Valley called Vasudhara. And from Vasudhara, he received for example, the Yamantaka teachings that are practiced here before Losar. And he also studied with teachers from different parts of Nepal and India, Orissa and other places. And so he held basically all the Vajrayana lineages that had been introduced into Tibet at that time by Guru Padmasambhava and so forth, and preserved them. And we have his writings. He wrote a commentary on the Wisdom Assembly Sutra, which is a tantra, called a sutra. It's called a sutra because it's not just bait and switch. There are reasons, literary reasons for it. But anyway, he wrote a commentary on that is 3 volumes long, each volume being of about, I'd say, 1,500 pages. So he wrote extensively. And he is also, in legend, said to have terrified the oppressor king with his magical power. Whatever happened, we know what he wrote. And it became the basis for what we now call the Nyingma Kama, the oral tradition of the Nyingma. Now, other oral or long lineages survived. For example, in the great Sakya tradition, the lineages of both Vajrahiruka and Vajrakumara most famously have survived, and so on. But Nupchen held all this and preserved it. For our purposes, what's most significant about Nupchen is that he was or is Manjushri, the Bodhisattva Manjushri. You could say an emanation of Manjushri, the presence of Manjushri among us, however you want to put it. And that his personal practice, therefore, centered around the form of Manjushri known as the Slayer of Death, Yamantaka. The other previous life of Terchen Barway Dorje that's significant, of course, they're all significant, Milarepa, Naropa, and so on, but for our purposes and understanding of the Terma tradition, is Yeshe Dzogchen. Yeshe Dzogchen was, according to most of the biographies of her, a woman from a noble family who was fought over because her family is trying to create alliances and so on, fought over as a potential bride, and managed to escape from that and became Guru Rinpoche's foremost disciple. And also, she is said to have had, what do we call it, total recall? What we used to say eidetic memory, photographic memory. And so she was not the only scribe who wrote down Guru Rinpoche's teachings. There were many others. But she was probably one of the most famous. Now, she held all of Guru Rinpoche's teachings, but principally her personal practice is said to have been the deity Vajrakilaya or Vajrakumara. And the reason we need to know that is because this is going to show up in the termas of Terchen Barway Dorje. There's some leeway, but basically with most treasure revealers, all of whom are regarded as rebirths of Guru Rinpoche's disciples, generally speaking, at least the majority of the treasures they reveal will center around the cycles of teaching that they principally practiced and principally held from Guru Rinpoche. All right. So let's look at what these what the teachings of this lineage include. Some of them. The characteristic teachings of the Barum Kagyü are called the three gems. And this doesn't mean the three jewels like Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. It means three, you could say, levels or types of practice. And gem here means wish-fulfilling jewel. And these are called the ordinary or common wish-fulfilling jewel, the wish-fulfilling jewel of Samaya, and the wish-fulfilling jewel of mind itself. The origin of these terms goes back to the teachings that Tilopa received from Vajradhara and from a group of wisdom deities called the formless Dakinis, or you could say invisible Dakinis. And so it's very much connected with the innermost essence of the Kagyü lineage. The principle, the common wish-fulfilling jewel refers to the generation stage practice of the deity Chakra Samvara, or Korlo Damjo. And Chakra Samvara is practiced in all branches of the Kagyü tradition. It's also very widely practiced in the Gelug tradition. And, but in the Barum Kagyü, he is the principal deity. For example, in the Karma Kagyü, really the principal deity, in the beginning at least, is Vajrayogini, not her male consort Chakra Samvara. So there's a difference in emphasis. So the ordinary or common wish-fulfilling jewel is the generation stage of Chakra Samvara. And that can take many different forms depending upon the needs of the individual. You can have just the deity with consort. You can have them plus 4 other female deities. You can have them plus 8 others, making 13 because couples count as 1 in this enumeration. Or you can have the 37 groups, which is actually 62 deities, but they correspond to the 37 factors of awakening. So all of these are part of the Barum Kagyü tradition. The emphasis is in, when you do a long retreat, is on the 5 deity form, and on daily practice on the single deity form. Along with this, and very important, but not sort of adjunct to it, is the protector practice of the 4-armed Mahakala. The 4-armed Mahakala is the principal protector of all 12 branches of the Dogpo Kagyü, except for the fact that since then some others have developed their own. For example, in the Karma Kagyü lineage, the principal protector would be Gompo Benachen, another form of Mahakala. But basically, the Dokpo Kagyü protector is, the principal one is the four-arm Mahakala, and especially for the Sormang tradition. So the Barum Kagyü also have many teachings connected with that. And the significance of that for us, since we're talking about history and what we do here, is Atsara. The four-arm Mahakala is associated very closely with the Yidam Chakra Samvara. It's basically said to be a wrathful form of Chakra Samvara. The four-arm Mahakala has within his retinue an emanation who is called an action protector. And he's called the raven-headed one because he has a raven's head. His emanation is Atsara. So Atsara is regarded as the previously human and now we would say superhuman emanation of the raven-headed one, who is an emanation of the four-arm Mahakala, who is an emanation of Chakra Samvara. And so that's how we ended up with the practice of Atsara. And the historical precedents to this were that Atsara was a friend of the Pandit Naropa, when Naropa was at Nalanda or sometime after that. And therefore, when Naropa took rebirth as Terchen Barway Dorje, Atsara approached him and said, "Hi, remember me," or something like that, and then became a source of great assistance. So the basic generation stage practice of the Barum Kagyü is Chakra Samvara, and that's the first of the three wish-fulfilling jewels. The second, the wish-fulfilling jewel of Samaya, is the 6 dharmas of Naropa. And of course, every one of the 12 branches of the Dokpo Kagyü presents the 6 dharmas of Naropa. And they are all a little bit the same and a little bit different. Basically, what we could talk about in this context and venue is the purpose. The 6 dharmas of Naropa are what is characterized as an upaya marga, path of means. But it's interesting that in colloquial Tibetan, as spoken at least by His Holiness, he'll use the term tablam to mean just the way to get things done. The only way to do something, to get things done. So it kind of means, has a connotation of strategic efficiency. So what is the strategy? What makes these 6 practices so important? From the point of view of Vajrayana, we can look at our mind well, you can look at it in many ways, but in one of 2 ways. And according to the Barum Kagyü teachings themselves, if you're a young whippersnapper, the strategic approach may work better. And if you're a person of years, is that a nice way to put it? The path of liberation, which is Mahamudra per se, is likely to work better. So what is the strategy and why would it be associated with youth? The strategy is to look at the 6 situations that we experience in our lives and at their ends. By situations, they call them the nekap situation. It means not consciousnesses in the sense of mind consciousness, eye consciousness, and that, but states of conscious experience. Because each one brings different problems, and therefore, if focused on exclusively, may need different solutions. So this explanation of what these are is not going to take the 6 dharmas in order, but we'll come back to that. Are you not hearing? Is it? Oh, okay. The first is the waking state, like now. Looks like it, yeah. And the waking state, we spend, I guess, most of our time, maybe 16 hours out of 24 or more in that state. And the particular problem with the waking state is that we think, feel, and act as though what we experience, including our own bodies, is real. Now, I'm not going to get into the philosophical arguments against the reality of mere appearances, nor would it be appropriate for me to go into too much detail. But basically, you want to be able to recognize that everything you see, hear, feel, smell, and taste while you're awake is like a magical illusion. Now, I'm not saying is a magical illusion, is like a magical illusion. To give you a very, very generic analogy for this, it's like what you see in a dream. Now, you may say, well, no, it's totally different. Because when I dream, nobody else sees what I do. Well, nobody else sees what you do now either. They see something similar, but they don't see exactly what you see. And then you say, well, yeah, but dreams don't last. He says, you just haven't woken up from this one yet. Anyway, so that's the approach in a very, very generic way that's taken to the waking state, and that's called the Dharma or yoga, people like to say, of the illusory body. The second state that we experience, hopefully every night or at some point, is dream. And dream consciousness is different from the waking state. Obviously, there are segues between that's. I forget the name for I can't remember. Hypnagogia, that's it, hypnagogia. There's you can have that state where you're starting to fall asleep and your thoughts start to turn into pictures and then you think they're real. That's a transition between the waking state and dream state. But fundamentally, you're dealing with a different thing in dreams. You're dealing with habits. So, for example, the body that we inhabit during the waking state is called the fully ripened body. Fully ripened doesn't mean that you need to take a shower. Sounds like that. Dude, you're ripe. Yeah. It means that your body is the full ripening of one of your previous actions. Every volitional, intentional action has 4 consequences. And one of them, the most dramatic, is the full ripening. So you can infer from the fact that you have the type of body you have, the human body capable of doing this with good tendencies to good deeds and so on, means you must have done something right. Probably quite a great deal of something's right in the past. So the physical body that we experience during the waking state is called the fully ripened body. The body we experience in dreams is called the habitual body. It's a mishmash. We just mishmash or mishmash? Mishmash? Okay. Oh, mosh is like mosh pit. Yeah, okay, thank you. It's a mishmash of habits, memories, wishes, tendencies, fears, and so on. And, you can be your current age in a dream in 1 minute, and then you're 5, and then you're 13, and then you're, whatever. I mean, we all know this. This is not a big deal. So, and because the withdrawal of the sense consciousnesses into when you're asleep and dreaming makes your mind kind of drunk or silly. They call it Nyingma, which is additional delusion, double delusion. It has a special type of delusion to it, and therefore can require special attention. And so therefore we have the dream yoga, or the Dharma of dream. The third state that we experience, again, although we usually we're not aware of it, so it's questionable whether we can even say we experience it, but we undergo it, is deep sleep. And in the state of deep sleep, most of the what we could call sporadic or eventful functions of the mind become dormant. As Trungpa Rinpoche has explained it, of our 8 consciousnesses, 2 are constant and 6 are sporadic. So the mental consciousness, which is what thinks and so on, is, stops and starts, does things and stops. And the 5 sense consciousnesses also. But the all basis consciousness and the mentally afflicted consciousness are ongoing until, some say until you achieve Buddhahood or achieve a certain level. They stop at different levels. So they're still ongoing when you're deeply asleep. So it's kind of like an even harder state to get at, to access, because even if you don't know you're dreaming when you're dreaming, you do experience the dream some way. It's often you'll remember it or remember parts of it. Most of us don't remember being deeply asleep. So introducing awareness into that state may require some special strategy. And that's called the Dharma or Yoga of Luminosity. Then the fourth state, which they don't like to talk about too much, but it's very important, is also, usually when you're awake. And that's the state of orgasm. The process leading to it and the orgasm itself. And that's obviously needs a lot of work. So therefore, we have a practice to enable you to control that and change it, which is called Chandali. Chandali means a ferocious woman. It was originally a kind of a caste, not a full caste like in the 4 castes, but a social level in India. I guess it's kind of like saying wild woman. Anyway, that's the name of it, and that tells you nothing about it, which is pretty much what I'm aiming for. So those 4, they're called the 4 root dharmas, or 4 root yogas, deal with the 4 situations that we experience. The waking state, the dream state, deep sleep, and then we would say arousal and orgasm. But then life comes to an end, so we have 2 others. And the first one, in the way it's taught in some systems, is about the bardo, and the second one is the ejection of consciousness. In other systems, the ejection is taught first because that's going to happen first if you do it. If you're in the bardo, it's too late to perform ejection. The Dharma of the bardo includes all the various means by which one could prepare for that experience. It begins with understanding the stages, learning to recognize, if possible, the stages of your consciousness withdrawing, shutting down, and so on. And you can experience many stages of this but without dying, Sometimes when you're sick, for example, you'll start to see like fireflies and smoke and stuff like that. That's the beginning, the very beginning of a withdrawal of the consciousnesses. And then the ejection of consciousness, which is very well known, is how to control where your mind, where your consciousness goes when you die. So those are 6, we could say, strategic or methodical ways to respond to 4 situations during our lives and train the mind that is our state of mind during them, and the moment of death and what happens after death. So those 6 together comprise the second wish-fulfilling jewel, the wish-fulfilling jewel of Samaya. And then we have the third one, the wish-fulfilling jewel of mind itself. And that is the Barum Kagyü practice of Mahamudra, which Barompa taught here, probably in the library, but many years ago. For those who were there, the text is also available in English. And that is one of them. And so Mahamudra teachings, and those ones in particular, comprise the third wish-fulfilling jewel. Another thing that is very much a part of the Barum Kagyü system is the practice of Chü, or severance. It's widely said everybody practices Chü, in the sense that every lineage does, and I guess that's true. But the Barum Kagyü have a fairly extensive, more elaborate series of practices connected with this. So one thing that should be obvious at this point is that I'm talking too much. No. Is that when we say one system, one lineage, the lineage of Barway Dorje, and now we're just talking about the Barum Kagyü stuff, we haven't even gotten to the Terma yet. There are more practices, more ways to progress than any one individual might be able to practice. Now, if you do a Barum Kagyü long retreat, you would practice Chakra Sambhara, the six dharmas, and Mahamudra, of course. But the point is that there are, even within one tradition, there are different approaches that can be taken. And this is very important to the understanding of the Vajrayana. In the Tenjur, in the translated Indian commentaries, there is a collection of biographies of the 84 Mahasiddhas. And I remember that Barompa liked it so much he read it. He really enjoyed it. I had read it earlier. You may be able to find it in the English library in translation as Buddha's Lions. It was translated in the 1970s. If you read these stories, you'll see that, and Trungpa used to always emphasize this, that the particular needs, often the particular flaws of the about to become a Siddha person were always very much connected to how their master guided them. And so although they all practiced some form of Vajrayana, the particular way was suited to them. It was strategic in that sense and individual. So, as Lama Trotop has pointed out on many occasions, Vajrayana really is never one size fits all. It always has to be, the teachings, the practices really do need to be tailored to the individual. And because standardization is needed by vast institutions, of course there is some, but we've never lost that wisdom, that it's really very, very individual. Okay, so now we can start to look at the 9 volumes of Terma. I'm sorry this is so complicated. It's about to get much, much, much worse. Okay. To understand the way that the Terma system of Terchen Barway Dorje fits together as a cohesive body of teachings, we need to look at a little bit of Nyingma history. In the Nyingma tradition, as Kondro Rinpoche once taught here in this room, we refer to the 3 roots as Guru, Yidam, and Dakini. And she said that in the more monastically oriented traditions, I guess they don't want to talk about Dakini so much, so they say Guru, Yidam, and Dharmapala. Another possible reason, to be fair, is that in many of those traditions, the principal yidams are also dakinis, so therefore it would get confusing if you say, you know, Guru Dakini and Dakini. So basically, if you look at any complete Nyingma system, and the teachings of Terchen Barway Dorje are a complete system, more than complete, more stuff than, you know, well, you'll see. You already know, most of you. There's going to be a set of Guru practices, a set of Yidam practices, a set of Dakini practices, also protectors, of course, and of course, Dzogchen teachings associated with one or more of these cycles. So, one way to divide the termas of Terchen Barway Dorje is into the four, they're called Chitta sadhanas, which means accomplishment of the heart of the Vidyadhara Guru. And they're called four, so there are 6 of them. Those of you who come to the 10th day pujas will know that the one we practice on the 10th day is the combined sadhana, which is a combination of the outer sadhana of Guru Nongsi Zunan, the inner sadhana of Tsoche Dorje, the secret sadhana of Padmavajra, and the very secret sadhana of Vajradharma. And you may also remember that the individual ones, the 4 individual ones, have been lost, were lost during the Cultural Revolution. So we haven't been able to find those yet. But what we have is the principal practice, which is the combination of all of them into one. And almost all of you probably have gotten quite used to this as what we do on the 10th day. So there are the 4, outer, inner, secret, and very secret. Then there's the combined sadhana. And then there is also the sadhana of the wrathful Guru, Dorje Trolut. And we're going to come back to that because it's considered both a Yidam practice and a Guru practice. And so we're going to have to talk about it twice. So that's one cycle, one set of practices. Then the aggregate name for the Yidams of the Terchen Barway Dorje's Terma is Palchen Dupa, or the Assembly of Great Splendor. And this is confusing because many other Terma systems refer to their Yidam as Palchen Dupa. For example, most famously the Longchen Yingtik. But we're going to explain briefly or look at briefly what that means, what that refers to. And then the Dakini teachings, which were the first Terma that Terchen Barway Dorje recovered, are called the profound meaning, the ocean of Dakinis. And within that, the principal practice is of the white Kichari, but there are also practices of the other 4 families of Dakinis, of red forms, of Vajrayogini, and 7 principal protectors of that cycle, and also applications. So we'll come back to the applications in a minute. Now, also lost during the Cultural Revolution was, I would say, about 1/3 of the White Kichari or Ocean of Dakini teachings. We have all the liturgies, we have the empowerment, we have the manuals on the Great Feast Dance and so on. What we're missing are the many, according to Lama Troto, many of the commentaries. There were extensive commentaries associated with that cycle on both the completion stage in general and the the practice of Dzogchen. So that's the first volume, and theoretically the last 3 volumes. So volumes 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, is that right? Yeah. Those 5 volumes make up the practices of the Assembly of Great Splendor. The first volume, which is huge and is now printed as, it used to be 2, now it's 3, but we consider it 1 volume because we like numbers to correspond to sacred things, so we want that it be 9. The first volume is concerned with Manjushri. And this includes the 2 peaceful forms, the white Manjushri sadhana, and then a very concise practice of the orange or red Manjushri, which we do before Losar. And then long and short practices of 5 different, or 6 different really, forms of Rothwell Manjushri. Now, for those of you familiar with the pre-Losar extravaganza, that is the very short version of the long version of the short version. The short version of the long version would be a lot more chanting, and the long version of the short version would be a lot more chanting. So we could say this is, but it's not the daily practice, so we would call it the short version of the long version of the short version. According to Lama Trato, when they do it at Raktro Monastery, it takes from 4 or 5 in the morning until past midnight every day to finish 1 round, because they're doing lots and lots of stuff. Now, the significance, aside from whatever our own personal inclinations and connections may be, for us of this, is the reason why Yamantaka is pretty much the longest fully existent Terma cycle of Terchen Barway Dorje, is that he was or is the rebirth of Nupchen Sanji Yeshe, who was the principal inheritor of the Yamantaka teachings, both of Guru Rinpoche and of the Nepalese master Vasudhara. Then the third volume and the first half of the fourth are concerned with, so we had Manjushri body, and the next is lotus speech. And lotus speech has 2 parts, the peaceful form and the wrathful form. And the peaceful form has 2 parts, of course. The first of which is the 4 ayusadhanas, or longevity practices. Now really, these are applications from the Ratna Dakini branch of the ocean of Dakinis. But they're not particularly centered on the Ratna Dakini. And there are 4 of them, so therefore there are 6. And we have all 6. And the 6 are the outer long life practice of the Guru, the inner long life practice of the Yidam, Hayagriva, and Vajravarahi, the secret long life practice of the Dakini, and the very secret long life practice of Amrita Kundalini. And then there is also a combined practice of all 4 of these. All of these have different empowerments, different sadhanas, and so on. And then there is a concise long life practice, which many of you will have received from Rinpoche, called the Rishi Ayusadhana. So the 4 of these are 6, and we have all of that. None of that is missing. The second part of the peaceful part, so that third volume, is all centered on Chenrezig, the principal peaceful form of lotus speech. And this includes 2 practices, but because Chenrezig is Chenrezig, there are lots of beneficial applications, lots of ways to use the compassion of Chenrezig to, especially to benefit the ill or recently deceased, and so on. So, for example, during the 49 days of observances we performed following Barompa's parinirvana, 1 week was devoted to one of these two Chenrezig practices. So there's a white Chenrezig principle and a red Chenrezig, and there are two forms of the red Chenrezig, and the white Chenrezig has 4 goddesses, one of whom is Tara, one of whom is Saraswati, one of whom is, I forget. Anyway, Kurukule, and then another one, maybe it's Marichu. Anyway, they each have their own sadhanas, their own empowerments, and so on. So if you ask, well, if we have our own green Tara practice, why do we not do Barway Dorje's green Tara practice, on Losar morning? Why do we do Chochu? Because it's too long. It's just way too long. I mean, you'll see, because I'm working on all this stuff. It's long. So those are the 3rd volume, the peaceful aspect of the Lotus family. And then the 4th volume, the first half of that, is a form of Hayagriva who is also Vajrakilaya, called the Tapuranampo, or Hayagriva Kila, and he's black. There are also red forms of Hayagriva, obviously ones previously. I found about 6 or 7 different forms of Hayagriva in these termas. But the principal one, the sort of the trademark one, if I may, is Hayagriva Kila. And then to understand what's in the second half of that 4th volume, we need to look at them all in a different way. Because all of this is too simple. It's not. The term Assembly of Great Splendor refers originally to a supermandala. By supermandala, I mean a great mandala which incorporates, in this case, 9 other mandalas. It's not the only supermandala that we have. There's one that includes 21 different mandalas. And of course, there's the Kala Chakra. So there are lots of supermandalas that include many other mandalas. But the best known one for the Nyingma tradition is called either the Assembly of Great Splendor or sometimes the 8 sadhanas, because originally they're practiced individually. Now, as an interesting footnote, when you look at the Indian texts, some of which exist in the Tenjur, because not all of these were originally Terma, some came through. They refer to them, they don't use the word sadhana, they use the word nopika. And I don't read Sanskrit, so I went to some people who do, and they said that there's no such thing as a word nopika in Sanskrit. So what our best guess is that it's an elaborate way of expanding the word sadhana. To sadhana, of course, means to gain siddhi, attainment. And nopika means method also. So our guess is that it's a shortening of sadhanopikaya. Sadhana, upayika. Upaya would mean means, and sadhana, upayika, because of the joining of Sanskrit words, becomes sadhanopayika, and then gets, over the centuries, gets turned to nopika. But since there may not be a word nopika, it's easier to just call them the 8 sadhanas. And these are Manjushri body, whom we've looked at, lotus speech. Each of them has peaceful forms and wrathful forms. And then the third one is, we're going to get to later, the third one. And the fourth one we're also going to get to later, because they're in the 5th volume. All right. So the second half of the 4th volume is the cycle of the Rishi Loktripala, who is a form of Vajrapani very much focused on in the Nyingma tradition. And if we classify him as one of the 8 sadhanas, the particular one would be called forceful mantra, Nupadrangak. And the Rishi Loktripala includes both peaceful forms and wrathful forms and so on. So then the next volume, the 5th volume, includes 2 cycles. A very short one, well, not very short, and a long one. The short one is the equivalent in this Terma tradition of the 3rd of the 8 sadhanas, a perfect mind. And in this case, the practice is subtle essence, Vajrasattva, which many of you have become familiar, with which many of you have become familiar. And it includes, of course, the mandalas of the peaceful and wrathful deities, both as internal body mandala and as external support front generation as well. The other and majority of the 5th volume is another cycle of the peaceful and wrathful deities that is called the Peaceful and Wrathful Deities of the Spacious Expanse. And that is the equivalent or the form of the 4th of the 8 sadhanas, which is, it has 2 names. One is Amrita qualities, and the other one is the Supreme, Heruka. And according to Lama Trotop, this fulfills the function of Amrita qualities because the Amrita accomplishment practice of our tradition, of this tradition, is found in that. Amrita accomplishment is an extremely involved and complex, at least week-long ceremony where, you know, the little Amrita, the Dharma blessing pills you get, where those are created and blessed. And in the tradition of Barway Dorje, that is done using the peaceful and wrathful deities of the spacious expanse. The 6th volume includes 2 cycles of Vajrakilaya or Vajrakumara practice. The shorter one is called the necklace pouch or collar pouch of Yeshe Tsojal. And many of you who've attended the Shulka or Mahakala here will be familiar with that. And I know that there are some who practice it as a daily practice as well. The collar pouch of Yeshe Tsojal is used as one's personal. If one's a Vajrakilaya practitioner, it's the daily practice, and also can be done as a retreat practice, doing the approach and accomplishment, and can also be used with additions, which were composed by Terchen Barway Dorje or put together by him, in much the way we use Yamantaka before Losar. So eventually it would be nice, either here or at one of our affiliates, to have yearly Vajrakalaya ceremonies. The other Vajrakalaya practice is called the Great Kila of Becoming and Peace. Becoming meaning samsara, and peace meaning nirvana. And it's a massive cycle. Compared to Yamantaka, it's shorter. I think Lama Nyingma one day said to me, he said, "Oh, that's not so hard. It's not compared to some of these other ones we do, you know." But it's long, and that brings us to the issue of Nupchen. Nupchen is a type of practice where it goes on 6 times a day. The mantra is unbroken. People sleep in the shrine room, and it's extremely intense and involves a lot of different sorts of rituals and practice, but the defining feature of Nupchen is that normally when we practice as a group, each of us imagines ourselves as the principle of the self-generation mandala. If there are surrounding deities, we imagine them around us. If there is a body mandala, we imagine it within us. And then we'll also have one in front. In the practice of Nupchen, you begin that way, but at a certain point, you individualize. Each person dissolves and rearises as one of the deities, so that the group, led by the Vajra king, in the context of Nupchen, you don't just say Vajra master, you say Vajra king, and it's very formal. Everything has to be blessed, including the brooms that are used to clean the shrine room, the cooking implements. The cooks have special names. I mean, it's way cool, but a lot of work. So each person takes the role of one deity of the mandala. And so that's the most elaborate form of practice that we have in the Nyingma tradition. And in the Barway Dorje tradition specifically, you can do a Nupchen with any of the cycles. We have the texts. There is a Nupchen template liturgy for the Assembly of Splendor in general. I mean, there's a long one and a short one. Short now, it's not really short. We'll call it short. And that can be used for the Guru Rinpoche practice or for any of the yidams other than Yamantaka and Vajrakilaya, because of course they have their own. And then there is another one for the White Kachari. And that brings us to the final volumes. So we've had Manjushri body, lotus speech, perfect mind, Amrita qualities, and now Kila activity, Vajrakilaya. And then the remaining ones are, as the second half, the previous fourth volume, which is forceful mantra. And then the, oh yeah, we'll get to that one. And then back to Dorje Trollut, who is also characterized as Jigten Chötut, or literally it means veneration and praise of the worldly. But it's not that he's a worldly deity. It means that he is, let's say he's our intermediary to, he intercedes for us with the worldly deities. And that's something that we will one day do here, the Trollut. And that's all translated. That's all like ready to go whenever. Translation is the easy part. Then you putting it all together, making actual readable texts out of it, because people want to be able to chant the Tibetan while reading the English, and then it has to be edited and so on. Then you have to get the stuff together. Then you have to show people how to do it. Then it's translation is the easy part. The process is very, very involved of getting all this together. It takes, I would say more than half the people in this room have already worked on some aspect of these projects. Okay. So the remaining 3 volumes originally were those of the Ocean of Dakinis. So that's the contents. Those are the contents, I should say, of the Terma. And again, none of this is intended to be one size fits all. There is a tradition, as I mentioned much earlier, of practicing at least one form of each of the 3 roots. So in which case one would do the Guru Rinpoche Ngondro and then the Guru Rinpoche practice, and then one of the major yidams. It could be Yamantaka, it could be Vajrakilaya, it could be the Rishi Loktripala, it could be Hayagriva. That's up to the individual and whoever their spiritual advisor is. And then you would go on and do the probably the White Kachari branch of the Ocean of Dakinis. However, that is not an absolute necessity. There is no written law, according to Lama Trotop, that every practitioner needs to do that things or in that order. Definitely some form of ngondro is highly recommended. But then after that, some people might just want to meditate on Guru Rinpoche. Some people might just want to meditate on Manjushri or just on Vajrakhilaya and so on. In most cases, if the principal deity is wrathful, it will be preceded by the mantra accumulation of the peaceful form. That's especially important with the Manjushri and Yamantaka cycles. And then we come to the completion stage. Previously, we looked at the completion stage of the Barum Kagyü, which had two aspects: the path of means, the six dharmas of Naropa, and the path of liberation, the Mahamudra, also known as the wish-fulfilling jewel of Samaya and the wish-fulfilling jewel of mind itself. Here, the main completion stage practices are there is completion stage per se, which is taught, for example, in the Terma concerning the Ngundro in the Guru Rinpoche cycle. And you've all read it, it's in the White Book. But then the main practice, of course, is the practice of Dzogchen. And that comes principally now from two cycles: the Guru Rinpoche cycle, which is the basis for the Dzogchen teachings that have been given here in the summer retreats. And there's also Dzogchen teaching as part of the life kila of becoming and peace. We know that there was also a third cycle of Dzogchen teachings connected with the Dakini cycle, but that appears to be lost. I think there may still be people living who've received the reading transmissions of these texts, but I think that copies of the texts are very hard to find. Because Terchen Barway Dorje was a turn of the century Terten, like Dujim Lingpa, his teachings did not get included in the Rinchen Terzu because of the timing. Because bringing books back and forth and so on in Tibet was not easy. I mean, I can remember many days where I would be given a reading transmission for a collected text, and they'd say, "Oh no, this part had not come to Eastern Tibet when this was only at Tsurpu, or this was only at Palpung," and so on. So transportation was an issue. There is a legend that some of Terchen Barway Dorje's disciples refused to allow it to be included in the Rinchen Terzu because they were afraid it would be just parts of it and not all of it. But I question that because Terchen Barway Dorje himself lived 19 years after Jomgon Lodrö Taye passed away, so I don't know. In any case, because it was one of many cycles that did not get included in the Rinchen Terzu and therefore easily brought out of Tibet or found by Gene Smith, it got scattered. The teachings got scattered for a couple of reasons. One reason was it's very much, not entirely, but very much a lay tradition, not a monastic tradition. The other reason, and therefore suffered in the Cultural Revolution because people would only hide the books they had in their walls and so on. The other reason is that various monasteries had real interest in one or another of these cycles. And therefore that one would be preserved there and so on. Lama Trotop's grandfather, Karma Tupten, was not solely, but primarily responsible for finding these books, which he had received from the second Barway Dorje. In some cases, as I mentioned, people hid them behind false walls, and people did all kinds of things to protect them from the ravages of the Cultural Revolution. So he was able to get almost everything. thousands and thousands and thousands of documents. What we don't have, as I said, are the 4 separate peaceful Guru Rinpoche practices that are all combined into the one that we do. And we don't have one of the 3 volumes worth of the Dakini practice, the commentaries on the completion stage and probably on Dzogchen. Everything else we have, not just the books, but the reading transmission and empowerment lineages and the actual implementation, how to do the sand mandalas, how to do the great feast dance, all the things. It's hard for me to talk about because I'm a complete washout as a Terma maker, mandala drawer. I can do the part where you use a compass and so on, and but once it's freehand, it's not pretty. So I'm not, I will never be a Vajrayana artist. But I have seen clear evidence that people in our culture can be really, really good at it. I've seen Nyingma centers. I won't mention names because then it would hurt the feelings of the people whose names I don't mention. But I've seen some Nyingma centers where I saw sand mandalas, dance costumes, and performance of dance that were more than good enough. So this is something that we shouldn't think that we'll never ever get there. As I said yesterday, it's all about aspiration. We don't need to practice all of these things. No one person can do, all of these things every day. But if somebody is an artist, they can use that skill to help prolong the teachings. Several of you have musical backgrounds. That helps KPL. That helps Bardo Rinpoche's lineage. I am, to say the least, not a musician. So I'm limited in what I can do, especially now that I have to drum with my left hand. I'm left-handed for everything except drumming and hockey, which are kind of the same, actually, now that I think about it. But anyway. So that is those are the facts and figures of the lineage. I know this has been somewhat detail-oriented and a lot of sort of more information than, but this is what you wanted me to talk about. No, I think that's enough. So we have 20 minutes. If you want to start questions, we could start questions now. You're liable to have more questions today than Sure, thanks.
Thank you very much for giving us a glimpse of the great breadth of traditions that Rinpoche holds. I have a technical question. Did I understand correctly that Nupchen Sangje Yeshe received the Bima Mitik from Vasadara?
No. Nothing to do with Atsara,
okay.
and nothing to do with Nupchen Sangje Yeshe. Terchen Barway Dorje received the Bima Nyingtik from Chokje Lingpa.
Ah, right, okay. And does he still hold that, or did he teach that? Or was that just a personal practice?
No, I think he taught it. But the Bima Nyingtik and the rest of the Nyingtik Yabshi are maintained, thoroughly maintained in many branches of the Kagyü and Nyingma traditions. So, for example, a few years ago, Sanjin Nyingma Rinpoche gave them, and Lama Trotop went to receive them, as did other people. So it's not like a specialization.
Ah, okay. So it was among the many practices he received from Dorje Rinpa.
Well, I think it was the format in which he received his intensive Dzogchen training under Chokje Lingpa.
Ah, thank you.
Well, if you run out of questions now, what are we going to do this afternoon? Well, I'll have to just go home. Thank you. Okay, good. Thanks.
So from Linda Lee, you mentioned trollop, some kind of...
Not Anthony Trollope. Yeah, we actually have a special reading transmission lineage of Vanity Fair by Anthony Trollope. No, I'm sorry. Trollope.
T-R-O-L-U-P is what
No.
she wrote? Some kind of...
T-R-L-O umlaut. No, 2 dots.
Okay. Could you talk more about that, please?
It's a very, one of the best known of the wrathful forms of Guru Rinpoche. And there are many, many Tertuns who have cycles focused on Dorje Trollope. The two who come to mind, the three who come to mind, aside from Terchen Barway Dorje, are the first Mingyur Rinpoche, who is so closely associated with that form of Guru Rinpoche that when we were expecting a hurricane one day, Sutta Rinpoche and Mingyur Rinpoche were both there, not here, somewhere else. Sutta Rinpoche said, well, I'm not scared. We have Dorje Trollope here with us. And he meant it. And so Mingyur Rinpoche his Trollope cycle is probably one of the most famous and most practiced. It's practiced in almost all major Karma Kagyü monasteries. Then another Trollope cycle that is very well known is from the Terten Dudul Lingpa. Sorry, Dudul Dorje. Dudul Lingpa is Barway Dorje. And this is going to be confusing because Dudul Dorje was also a previous life of Dudjom Rinpoche and also a Terten. So among the old Terma, probably one of the best known is the Trollope of the Vijayadhara Dudul Dorje, who was a disciple of Gyatso Nyingpo and others, but also had his own Terma. And then, and was an associate of Karma Chame and that. Then I don't want to say as a result, but equally significant among the new Terma is the Trollope cycle of the previous His Holiness Dudjom Rinpoche, and starting with his predecessor, Dudjom Lingpa, and then also himself. So those are the different cycles of Trollope. And people tend to think of Trollope as primarily a means of averting disaster, removing obstacles, and so on. It's certainly, renowned for that. But it's also regarded by many people as a principal Yidam, because it's Guru Rinpoche, but he's also a Yidam in a certain way.
Okay, so now questions are coming in. So Marina, I have very limited understanding of this vast and awe-inspiring tradition, but I have a very simple question. What is it meant by a cycle of teachings?
A group of related teachings. The Tibetan word is kor, which means cycle, or chukur, dharma cycle. So it would mean like a group of documents that are all related. You know, like not one book, but several books that have a common theme or center around one another.
And now here's a question. Was he, which is you, Yeshe, supposed to elaborate more on secretarianism?
Secretarianism or sectarianism?
Yeah. Yeah. Secretarianism.
Secretarianism. That's so cool. That's like a great pun. Well, basically, yeah, thank you for reminding me. The point I wanted to make was simply that any one lineage always includes many lineages within it. For example, when we talk about not only Terma Barway Dorje, but our Barompa, he was a tulku enthroned at the seat of the 16th Karmapa, and therefore also a holder of the Karma Kagyü lineage, which he also practiced. And I left that out because we're talking about what was unique to Terma Barway Dorje's heritage, but that doesn't mean that's all he received. So if you talk about someone's lineage of a great master, like Terma Barway Dorje, Barompa, usually we're talking about what they're best known for. What was their specialization? What teaching did they emphasize? But because it's not one size fits all, because it's not something you can mass produce, there's going to be a lot more, a lot of variation, a lot of other things that for example, that Barompa taught people, or that Terma Barway Dorje taught people. And if you pursue the origins of the lineages that your teacher has received, you'll find that they're connected to many, many other lineages and so forth. And so at a certain point, the whole notion of being sectarian kind of feels ridiculous because you're not, we're not. All we can say is, yes, all the lineages I've received are Buddhist. And beyond that, Mahayana, for the most, because we also receive lineages of the common vehicle too. So, I guess what I'm saying is if we allow ourselves to become sectarian or worse, judgmental of other traditions, one day we're going to have to eat our hats because we'll find out that those traditions are our traditions also.
Next question. Is there somebody in here?
Thank you, Lama Yeshe. My questions is a little bit more general, and it has to do with Buddha Shakyamuni.
Oh, okay.
And I don't know, I just would be very interested if you could just touch on, I think I remember reading that Buddha Shakyamuni really took the name of a prior Buddha Shakyamuni.
That's what we're taught.
And that he was basically walking in his footsteps. So, so I'm bringing the lineage back even further, just touching on that there have been 4 Buddhas so far in this Kalpa, and Buddha Shakyamuni is the 4th. Mm-hmm. So we got a lot of Buddhas to come.
Mm-hmm. 996.
996.
I found who Barompa will be. It was a number 200 something. I forget the name. It's in that, you remember the tangas that we ordered? And then I wrote some things, or Barum wrote something and I translated it about the various lives and so on. It's somewhere in there. Anyway, I don't know what happened. I haven't seen that since. So, I don't know the name of the sutra from which this comes, but there is a piece of liturgy that, a stanza that a lot of us recite as an aspiration on a daily basis. But since I do it by memory, I may have it wrong. And it's like a lot of our aspirations. It can be our liturgies. It can be a template. But originally, as you said, it was the aspiration that the person who became Buddha Shakyamuni made when he either first, or at least first generated bodhicitta, or according to one version, first generated bodhicitta in the presence of a Buddha whose name was Mahashakyamuni. And the aspiration is, you could say, Mahashakyamuni, may I have a body like yours, an entourage like yours, and a lifespan like yours. Hold on. May the duration of my teachings be equal to that of yours, and may the realm of my awakening be like yours. May I only have those, which doesn't mean may I not have anything else, but means may I become just like you in all those ways. So name, form, entourage, lifespan, the duration of teachings, and a realm. So the original version of this is what the person who became Buddha Shakyamuni is said to have said to that when he offered him beans or something, I forget. And but we apply it to all kinds of other deities. People add it often at the end of prayers to Guru Rinpoche. They just say Pema Junghe Cheku Juran. And I've seen it even with Tara and other deities. So, but that's the aspiration.
Thank you.
In the precious essence, Barway Dorje locked himself in a retreat cell at Kudrak and practiced Yamantika. Is the liturgy he practiced the one of the 9 cycles?
Well, the Yamantika practice that he first did, I know, was one he received from Chogdur Lingpa. And it was one of the, it was called the 7 profound cycles that Chogdur Lingpa retrieved at one place. And it was, I think, as part of those cycles that Chogdur Lingpa found the kila that Rinpoche has used to bless us. The kila, it's called the blood drinker. And he recognized Terchen Barway Dorje as both the inheritor of his, Chogdur Lingpa's, Yamantika teachings, and also as an emanation of Nupchen Sanji Yeshe, and therefore gave him the kila because it had belonged to Nupchen Sanji Yeshe. Now, according to the precious essence, as I remember, the practice he did was the practice of the form of Yamantaka called the Ayupati, or Lord of Life, from the Terma of Chokje Lingpa. But often Tetons will begin, because I don't think Techen Barway Dorje publicly revealed that he was a Teton for a long time. Not until after, I believe, Chokje Lingpa passed, which was in 1871. Yeah.
Should we do another one?
Sure.
Thank you for carrying the torch of... Sorry. Thank you for carrying the torch of Dharma. Can you please say more about how the students of the third Barway Dorje can support his wishes for our Dharma activity?
Well, the first thing that's very important, and when I say this, I'm not scolding anyone. Okay, I'm not, I don't mean it that way. Is we have to get along. If you want your teachers' teachings to survive for a long time, this is not just in a spooky sense, it's common sense, right? We have to avoid fracturing the community in any way, or becoming, I never know how to pronounce this word in this country. We always just say clique, but here you say click? Click, click, like click. Yeah, we have to avoid separating, like, sometimes you have milk that it separates into one part and another part, and none of it's what you want. You want it all to stay together. So the first and most important thing I've been told is that we get along, that we all get along. And getting along really means to respect the fact that, well, I'll speak of myself. It's better. I am not Bardo Rinpoche's only student or greatest student, or, in my opinion, any special rank or type of student. It is my responsibility as his student to treat all his other students with at least as much respect as I have for myself. Now, since my practice involves, and I'm not good at it, but it's what I'm supposed to be doing, seeing myself as a deity all the time, that means I am honor bound to see each and every one of you as a deity. To treat you with that degree of respect. That's the first thing. Second thing is to practice as much as you can. But if we practice and become jerks, we might as well not practice. As His Holiness the Karmapa says, if we can't become decent human beings, just on a basic level, decent human beings, the rest of this is just, cause for laughter. And then the third thing is, stay connected to the community. Like if you watch webcast events, if you can travel, come to, here and then at the various affiliates, 2 or 3 of the affiliates, we also have events. And I mention that simply because when you are isolated, and this obviously is still a time of somewhat radical isolation for many of us, you start to get wiggy. People still use that word, wiggy? Yeah. You start to get wiggy because you start to, and actually the person who first said this to me was the 16th Karmapa. He didn't use the word wiggy, he was speaking Tibetan. But, if you're isolated from your spiritual community, and it has to be your spiritual community, the one you trust, the one you love, you start to get wiggy. Your mind gets kind of strange. You get, it's like, I can't describe it any other way. I've experienced it because we need the emotional support of one another. You know, we need doesn't mean you have to like afflict your Dharma sisters and brothers with constant emails or texts or anything like that, but it means we derive the warmth of the teachings from our teacher, but also from our fellow students, and that's important. So those are the things I would say. Try to get along, practice as much as you can, and stay connected. Oh, it's 12.
All right, so
All right.
there are more questions, but we've got the whole afternoon.
Yeah, we
so-
have the whole afternoon, or as much of it as people can stand. So we'll do just the first stanza on page 7 to conclude. Sonam de dam je zeng ba nye dom ne nye be ra nam bam je ne chenga na je ba la drum ba ye simbe